Just because I poke fun of the stories and or fan art in my videos does not mean that the creators of these things deserve harassment. Cyberbullying is a lot more serious than you think, especially since it sometimes leads to self-harm and or suicide. Please pick your battles wisely. That means do not harass any of the creators of anything featured in my narrations. Thank you.
Hey, let's try this shit again. Here's fucking messy. The wind. Shit. Okay. Hey guys, what is up? This is Scott, finally bringing you the Season 2 premiere of the Crappypasta Show. Now, I was gonna premiere it on Halloween, but guess some life circumstances and personal issues, which I'd rather not talk about, pretty much got in the way, and now I am finally doing this shit in November. Okay, a couple of things I want to talk about first. First of all, I really appreciate those few comments you guys have left me a while back. They definitely brighten up my day a little bit, as well as let me know that amongst my subscribers, I do have a little micro-sized fan base, and there is a plane. Anyway, it does let me know that I do have a little micro-sized fan base amongst my subscribers. Secondly, I've been trying to figure out whether or not I should create a Facebook page, or at least a Tumblr for this YouTube channel. I'm not entirely sure, since I only have like 77 subscribers right now. And speaking of the 77 subscribers, I think last time I updated it was like 69, so it's slowly getting attention. So let me know if you want me to create a Facebook or a Tumblr or any official social media for this channel. Now for the story itself. Today I will be bringing you John the Killer. Yep, it's a very long-ass Jeff and Jane spin-off that TCR actually read a few years ago, I believe. Yes, I do get inspiration from TCR and other YouTube channels. No, I'm not some obsessive-ass fangirl. In fact, I hardly ever watch TCR's videos. Not all anymore. Yeah, this is basically going to be one of those stories where it looks like it might be good on paper, but when you look at the context, it kind of sucks. And that is why I chose this for the premiere episode of the Crappypasta Show. Now, without further ado, let's get started, guys.
Entre enfermedad, epidemia, muerte, sepultura, en la demencia, la depresión, el desvarío y la locura. Hasta el día de la venganza, gritaré. Mientras tenga un soplo de vida, gritaré. Por todos los que no pudieron, gritaré. La rabia de los que soñaron con morir de pie.
Everyone knows the story of Jeff the Killer, right? And mostly everyone knows about Jane, Jeff's attempt to make someone like him. And everyone knows that didn't work out. But does anyone know the story of John? Now, Jeff had been on his rampage for the past 3 years. He's approximately 16 now. Jeff was still killing and doing his thing while trying to stay away from Jane, the usual. But still, even Jeff wasn't capable of normal thought anymore. He still felt kind of lonely. There was a slight emptiness that Jane was supposed to fill, So much for that. Jeff had a new idea. He decided if a type of lover would reject him, maybe a little brother type of person wouldn't. It was in the town of West Valley, a pretty small town. Jeff wouldn't be able to stay long without getting caught. In time, he noticed a young boy about 13 who seemed perfect. The kid was kind of nerdy and awkward, so he was picked on a lot. Just watching those bullies made Jeff angry. It caused him to remember parts of himself he had locked up for many years. John wouldn't take it, though. He often fought back, and in that moment, Jeff saw something in John's eyes. Just a small spark of pleasure from fighting. It reminded Jeff of him in some ways. That feeling Jeff could only explain was an odd feeling in the past, but now fully understands what it was. John had no idea he was about to become Jeff's latest victim. John felt an odd feeling when he fought, sure, but he never gave it much thought. It was an enjoyable feeling, so who really cared? John hadn't known anyone was watching him fight back. If he had, maybe he could have gotten away from what was going to happen to him. Maybe he would have been able to do something to prevent it. John wasn't able to do much damage to the bullies, but enough to keep them away from him for a little while. John went about the rest of his day with that feeling. The next day there was a news report. 3 boys were killed today on Parks Avenue. No one witnessed the event, however. Based on how they were killed, police suspect that the same unknown killer who has been murdering people across the country killed them. A young boy who survived this killer once is the only person who ever saw him. The description was chilling, but we can assume he is now in West Valley. John had, of course, heard the rumors of this killer, but never expected him to be in his own hometown. John was even more surprised when he realized the victims were the bullies that were picking on him yesterday. Was that just a weird coincidence? John was confused as to why them specifically, but once again didn't think too much about it. What John didn't know was that Jeff had simply done it as a favor to John. The next day seemed the same as any other to John. The teachers at the school told the students that something this unusual could cause stress for some students, so they had to go to a mandatory counseling session. John eventually had to go, even though he really didn't want to. "Hello, John Williams. How are you today?" the counselors asked in a sweet voice. "Fine," John replied, not really wanting to be there. "So, how have you been reacting to the recent tragedy? How do you feel about it?" she asked. I didn't know them very well. It's obviously sad, but not affected all that much," John replied honestly. She wrote down what he said and told him he could go, but if he needed to talk, he could go see her. It wasn't long until Jane heard the news report. Jeff hadn't left much evidence for a few months now. She had hoped he just died somewhere. So the trail on Jeff was warm again. "But West Valley is such a small town," Jane said. "What could Jeff possibly be doing there?" She didn't want to wait around to find out, so she set off for West Valley. She wasn't very concerned about what Jeff wanted there, just concerned about finally killing him. She only wanted at least part of this nightmare of her life to end. The real nightmare was just beginning for John that night. The nightly routine was normal for John: homework, dinner, TV, or video games, sometimes both. Then bed. But Jeff snuck in at the middle of the night. John heard some noise in the downstairs section of his house and went to check. That's when he saw his mom. He saw her with a wound in her stomach. She was stabbed. John couldn't believe what he saw. Jeff was there with a blood-stained knife in his hand and that evil grin carved on his face. "What the hell?" John yelled, and Jeff turned to look at him, still with that horrible grin. John screamed and ran from the room to go get his father, who had a metal baseball bat, hopefully. When John arrived in the room, however, Jeff somehow beat him to it, and John walked in just in time to see Jeff stab his father. "Just go to sleep, old man," Jeff said. John's dad let out a yell and falls to the floor dead. "No, stop!" John yelled. "You don't need them," Jeff said. "I'm the only family you'll need." That voice, John thought, that horrible, evil voice. It chilled him to his very bones. That voice was so full of malice and a sick type of joy. John ran with terror. "Don't worry, friend. I won't hurt you," Jeff called. John ran outside and bumped into Jane suddenly. John yelled again, worried that there were two of them now. "Don't worry, you don't have to be afraid. I'm here to help," Jane said. "Trust me." She looked like Jeff, but her voice was somewhat soothing and comforting, yet that darkness over her eyes made her seem soulless. "We must hurry," she said. Jane grabbed John and ran fast away from the house. Jeff only caught a glimpse of them running off. "Damn it, Jane!" he yelled, clearly angry even though his face still had its permanent smile. Jane had taken John back at a hotel room she was hiding out in during her stay. She knew for a fact if Jeff wanted to kill John, he simply would have, and that worried her more. If he didn't simply want to kill John, what did he want? "What the heck is going on? Who are you? Who was that guy?" John yelled in a panic. "Okay, first of all, calm down," Jane said. "My name is Jane, and that guy was Jeff. It's too long of a story to explain, but he likes killing people, and I've made it my life goal to finally stop him. As for what's going on, for some reason he doesn't want to kill you, and that concerns me." John was still panicked by this whole thing. John was just as confused as Jane. "He killed my parents," John mumbled, obviously scared. "He killed mine too. That's why I hate him so much," Jane replied. "I will try to protect you from him, but I can't promise anything." They kept on talking and discussing Jeff. They began trying to make a plan to kill him. They knew it might not be long until Jeff found them again. Then suddenly, Jeff charged into the room. "Hello, Jane. As much as I would love to chat, I have some business to finish," he said, looking at John with that evil face. "Stay away from me," John yelled. "What kind of lies has my former girlfriend been feeding you?" Jeff said. "What the hell are you talking about? I would never date someone as vile as you," Jane said, clearly angry. Whatever. Details don't matter. I need John," Jeff said, not at all interested in Jane. He went after John, and Jane cut him off. It wasn't long until the two were caught in a fight. Both of them were out for blood. Jeff kept on making swings with his knife at Jane. Jane was prepared to finally end Jeff, dodging his attacks and making a swing of her own. Jane then swept her legs under Jeff's legs, knocking them over. He rolled out just before she jumped on him. Jeff moved swiftly as he grabbed John and hurried out of the room. Jane chased close behind. Man, he was fast. It wasn't long until Jeff ran into an abandoned warehouse with John. "Okay, we will have to make this quick," Jeff said. "Let me go," John screamed, his eyes begging for mercy. "You killed my family." "I'm the only family you need from now on," Jeff yelled. He pulled out a bottle of some kind of beer. He smashed it over John's head until he was soaking in it. Jeff then pulled out a bottle of bleach and poured it over John's head. "I actually had some alcohol this time around." "Stop it! What are you doing?" John yelled. "This will all be over soon," Jeff said as he pulled out a lighter and threw it at John. Jane ran in just in time to hear John's horrible screams of pain and pure terror. Jeff laughed and jumped out a nearby window. See you soon, brother. Jane had no time to go after Jeff. She had to put out John's flames. She then heard police sirens. She didn't want to leave John, but didn't want to be arrested for setting the fire. I'll be back for you, she whispered, and also jumped out the window. When John woke up, he was in a hospital bed and bandages covered most of his face. Only a small opening was there for him to see out. He tried saying, "Where am I?" but it was muffled by his covered mouth, so it just came out as, "Mm-hmm." "Oh good, you're awake," a nurse in the room said. "It's been 2 weeks, we were worried." 2 weeks, John thought to himself. A few days passed and the nurse was taking care of him. They said they would have to wait before moving the bandages. John was scared of what had happened to him, but often felt that he was having trouble remembering exactly what had happened. All he knew for sure was that it scared him, terrified him. When he mentioned this to a nurse, she simply said that sometimes shock can cause a blur of memories for a while afterwards. Then, strangely, shock causes people to remember the incident very clearly. After a few more days, the doctor said they would remove the coverings. When they did, they all did a slight gasp. This confused John. "What?" he asked. He looked in the mirror and was a little scared. His skin was complete paper white and leathery. His once blonde hair was still short, but was now burnt black. He realized that he looked like those 2 other people, Jeff and Jane. "Oh my God," John said, clearly upset, almost crying. The nurse put her arm around John, telling him it would be okay, and in time, with more surgery, he could look almost completely the way he used to. John spent the next few days in the hospital. He was trying to cope with what happened. Part of him liked it. It felt like that odd feeling, but more intense. He was having trouble remembering things that had happened to him. His mind and memories were screwed up by the traumatic event. He was more confused than anything. Then one night, Jeff snuck in. "Hello, John," he said in that voice. "Jeff?" John said, barely remembering things. "How are you doing, little brother?" Jeff said. "Brother?" John asked in his dazed state. "Come and I'm getting you out of this place," Jeff said. He grabbed John and pulled him out of a window. John didn't seem to care. He was still confused, and even more so after Jeff called him his brother. Jeff handed John a pair of gray jeans, a white t-shirt, and a black hoodie to wear, instead of the hospital gown that he had been wearing. John quickly changed and grinned at Jeff. Jeff then handed John a kitchen knife. John insisted that he could spike up his hair, like he always used to. Jeff broke into a nearby store and stole some hair gel for John to use, maybe killing the clerk on his way, but neither Jeff nor John minded. Jeff and John left the town of West Valley a few days after that. They then went to the next town. They went to a town and found a group of drunken teen girls wandering around. Jeff decided to help them. Jeff and John both attacked the girls, with Jeff telling them to go to sleep and John not really saying anything. Jeff tried to get John to carve a smile onto his face, but John refused to. He wore a crazy smile most of the time anyway, so he didn't feel like it was necessary. It felt good to help Jeff, but a part of him was upset and even guilty at the very idea of what he was doing. Neither of them had realized that Jane had followed them. She had seen John with Jeff. Although he had changed, she still recognized him. She was angry at what Jeff had done to him. She wanted to attack them both. John recognized Jane as well, but couldn't remember much of her. It wasn't long until a fight broke out between them. Jeff and Jane went at an all-out knife fight, with John not sure what to do. Jane swung at Jeff with impressive speed. However, Jeff dodged and made an attack of his own. John was watching the two of them, confused for many reasons. One, what made them fight so instantly? Two, who should he help? And three, where did he remember Jane from? John wanted to help Jeff, but also knew somewhere deep down that Jane had good reasons, so he decided it was best not to get involved at all. Jane finally got past Jeff and hurried up to grab John and ran off. John was yelling all the way for her to let him go. Shut up, I'm trying to help you, Jane yelled at the kid. I don't need help, let go, John yelled as he started kicking. John, Jeff isn't your friend, don't you remember? Jane asked. John quieted down, but just looked at her. He wasn't sure what to think now. Some part of John wanted to trust her, but another part wanted to trust Jeff. Jane kept John with her for a few more days. He constantly struggled and tried to escape, but she always stopped him. One day, John even killed a random teen walking past during his stay with Jane. Nothing too gory or worth talking about, simply happened. Jane yelled at him, trying to convince him that he wasn't like Jeff and didn't have to be. I'm sorry, I don't want to kill, but I can't help it, John says, suddenly crying. His face lost that crazy smile, and his eyes showed sadness and even fear. Fear of himself, of Jeff, and of whatever part of him that let him act like Jeff. He was left crying as Jane tried her best to comfort him. She could admit even she had outbursts during which she killed people imagining that the person was Jeff and using it as practice for when she found him, so she could relate to John. Jeff eventually found John and Jane. He wanted to avoid Jane altogether, so he whispered and lured John away. Jane went to talk to John and found he was already gone. She knew Jeff had taken him, but also knew there wasn't much she could do. 1 year later, John was still slightly confused. His face showed nothing but pure insanity more often than not. He sometimes snapped back to reality and cried about the stuff he has done. Jeff tells him he is weak, but it proves that part of John isn't completely lost. Jane was barely lost at all and hated Jeff. Jeff was completely lost beyond any hope, and John was somewhere in between the two. John spends most of his time with Jeff, but sometimes wanders off on his own and can go as long as a month without Jeff. He has never found Jane again, although he tries too often. However, John remains hesitant about exactly what he should do and has been known to even warn his victims before killing them. John is still out there, and it's possible you might run into him. If he is in a normal mood, then there is nothing to worry about. He might talk to you about his life, he might just hang out with you, and act pretty much like a normal kid, but if you find him in an insane mood or when he's with Jeff, then watch out. You'll most likely be killed, and the last thing you hear from John would be this simple question. Should you go to sleep?
And that was John the Killer, a magnum opus of goofy-ass, shitty Jeff the Killer spin-off fan fiction. Yep. So, what do I have to say about this shit show? Well, first off, I think the spelling and grammatical errors are a lot more subtle on this one than on what I usually read. I mean, if you just skim through it, you can't even tell that there's anything wrong. That being said, these errors are still there and probably should have been corrected, but that's probably going to be the least of the story's problems. First of all, they use Jeff the Killer, the most overrated creepypasta character of all time. Now, I don't think Jane's quite as bad as Jeff, but she's not the best character either. And then they throw in this random ass kid named John. It's like, of all the kids, why pick this guy? basically the whole setup is pretty stupid. Now, other than the setup, there are a couple of things going on. To be honest, it's very difficult to come up with things that TCR hasn't already said about the story, like the lack of security when John was in the hospital, the mandatory counseling at the school. I think I think a couple of things that I like about it as a bad story is one, the the super awesome battle between Jeff and Jane going on, and as well as I think there was also one part where when Jeff took John away, he he broke into a store to get John some hair gel, maybe killing the clerk. It says. I mean, that's just too hilarious not to like, to be honest. And of course, the silliness of the bleach and alcohol, the super contrived plot device that made John look the way he is. One thing I'm gonna have to disagree with TCR on is the part where Jane the Killer. The part where it's mentioned that Jane the Killer has used people as practice to kill Jeff. In the original version of Jane the Killer, the one with the infamous photo, it is mentioned that Jane does kill a few people. How do I know that? You'll see that in a future narration, hint hint. In any case, yes, Jane has killed people, and it could be a little bit hypocritical, but that's part of her character, goddammit. So yeah, that's my 2 cents on that little part. I do agree about the awkward use of memory. I mean, you'd think after seeing Jeff that John would at least sort of become afraid. And of course, since nobody cares about some kid, there's no fucking police to watch this kid. And then there's the big ol' finale, the very last line. Should you go to sleep? The anticlimactic, silly little line from John the Killer. What's not to love about the story, am I right, guys? Next time on the Crappypasta Show, I will be reading Smile, another shitty killer story. As for my next upload, get ready for episode 2 of 120 Days of Sodom. Scott Cat signing out. Thank you and goodbye.